Hi, I'm Mary.
And I'm Katie, and this is The Housewife Did It.
True Crime Edition.
Woo!
If you like our show and you are excited for season 3 when it comes, you can like, subscribe, share with your friends. That way, when season 3 comes, you are the first to know. It hits your feed, and you have someone to listen with.
So fun.
Yeah, and they have a little bit of time to catch up on season 1 and season 2.
Yeah, and didn't you hear that's what we're doing in 2025? We're listening to podcasts with our friends.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right. It has been quite a week for true crime. I feel. I thought that maybe more things had happened, but I think it's just like a couple of things that I find really important. So first, 3 people have been detained in Liam Payne's death investigation, including 2 hotel workers and a friend of his. A friend. Not a good one.
No.
Who are accused of supplying him with drugs. Also, a lot more people are like starting to lean into the Diddy theory, but I just don't think it's backed up by anything. Personally, sorry, Dad. Second thing, Richard Allen was officially found guilty on all charges in the murders of Liberty German and Abigail Williams in Delphi, Indiana. That case has been a long time coming, and people have always said, like, this is a solvable case. This is a case that we can catch somebody, and they did. And he's going to prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
That's just dirty little life. But today,
it's a good one to have solved.
Yeah, but unfortunately today I'm going to tell you about a case that has not been solved, and truthfully we've never even been able to determine if it's a case.
Oh.
So, are you ready?
Yeah.
Have you heard of the Sodder children? Good. All right. Oh, also before I start, we have a bonus episode up. It's me and my husband talking to you about Appalachian creatures, and we forgot to mention it before right now.
Yeah. Go watch it. Billy said, "Oh, Appalachian creatures. That sounds interesting."
Wait, is he new here?
I said like, yeah, Appalachian creatures that Mary talks about all the time.
Yeah. Mary's
Silly.
favorite subject, Appalachian creatures.
Yeah. What?
We got to the end and Sammy was like, I was like, did I miss any? And he was like, yes. And I was like,
nice. Good for him.
So he told us about some too, because I didn't write them down. But anyway, we'll get started now. On Christmas Eve in Fayetteville, West Virginia in 1945, a tragedy and a mystery occurred that changed the community and to this day has not been solved or explained. That night, the home of the Sodder family burned to the ground. The family was made up of George and Jennie Sodder and their 10 children, John, who is 22, Marion, 19, Joe, 17, George Jr., 16, Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, Betty, 5, and Sylvia, 3.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
What a range.
Yeah. George, Jennie, and 4 of their children escaped. Joe was actively in the military and therefore was not home that night, but the 5 other children presumably died in the fire. The family, though, was not so sure. Bum, bum, bum. So, the Sodder family celebrated their holiday on Christmas Eve, as all good Italian families do, as it should be. If you're Catholic, you get it. The younger children asked if they could stay up past their bedtime because Marion would be home soon from her job at a downtown Fayetteville dime store. And Mom said yes. At 10 p.m., George, John, and George Jr. were already asleep, and Jennie told the other children that they could stay up even longer as long as the older children kept an eye on them, and if they agreed to bring the cows in and feed the chickens before going to bed.
In the dark? Dang.
1, 2, 3. Oh, no. Okay, sorry. I lost count of the children.
That's cool, because I did too, but...
Whoa! So... they were like, yes, anything you say to
we will
stay
get
up.
the cows and the chickens.
To see Santa.
We're on it.
At this time, Jennie and Sylvia went upstairs to bed. This must have been pre-Santa because they did not care at all about that man. At 12:30 a.m., Jennie was woken up by the phone ringing, and she headed downstairs to answer it. Have I said what year this is?
You might have. I don't remember though.
1945. Just
yes.
So I was like, the phone rang. I don't know anything about.
You think that this is pre-Santa?
I don't really think it's pre-Santa. I just
Santa came to be at the same time as like the civil rights movement.
I just find it interesting that there's no mention of Santa in any of the source material on this case.
Some children did just go to bed on Christmas Eve, Mary. Believe it or not. Some children did not vomit waiting to see their presents.
I guess my thought was like, if I had said, can I stay up past my bedtime on Christmas Eve, our parents would have been like, fuck, no.
Yeah.
But I did, however, when I wrote this, I was like, the phone ringing. No, it wasn't.
You're like, somebody got their facts wrong. Facts.
I Googled 1940s phone. I didn't believe them. Okay. Anyway. So the phone rang. And Jennie went to answer it. It was. There was a woman on the other end whose voice Jennie didn't recognize, and she felt like she heard like a party in the background. She was hearing like a lot of laughter, clinking glasses. She's like, "Oh, this woman's like at a party."
That's very specific.
She also noted that the woman had an odd laugh, and then she asked to speak to someone that Jennie didn't know. So she told the woman, you have the wrong number, and they hung up. And then...
And then you said, they have wrong numbers in 1945?
I was like, wow.
What a small world.
I was like, wow, they have like phones in 1945 and they're just dialing random numbers. Like,
you probably missed by like one number.
Getting the number wrong. Like, okay.
When you have to do this with the phone, don't you think you would just get it right?
I don't want to do that a second time.
You're like, wrong number? Cool, I guess I'm done for the night.
I guess we'll never call them.
Guess we'll never know.
So she hung up. On her way back to bed, Jennie noticed that the lights were still on in the living room and the curtains were open. And Marion was asleep on the couch, but the other children weren't there. And so she was like, that's weird, because normally they would like kind of close down the house. But she just assumed that they had forgotten and that they had all gone up to the attic to go to sleep because that's where their beds were. And so she closed the curtains and turned off the light herself before going back to bed. 30 minutes later, Jennie woke up again, this time to the sound of an object hitting their roof. They had a tin roof. An object hitting their tin roof with a loud bang, and then what sounded like the object rolling across the roof.
Santa.
But she didn't hear anything else.
Arose such a clatter.
Dad, what's a rose such a clatter? Is it rose such a ladder?
Hey, Dad.
So came back to sleep. Another 30 minutes later, Jennie was woken up yet again by the smell of smoke. So she got up to look around and she saw that there was a fire in George's office coming from the phone line and the fuse box. So Jennie alerted George to the fire. He woke up their two oldest sons. And they grabbed Sylvia, and then they grabbed Marion from the living room couch. And they yelled up the stairs to the attic to the other children to get out. John tried to go up to the attic to get them, but the stairway had already gone up in flames. So they were just like yelling at them, like, fire, get out. And they ran out of the house. Okay. And they assumed that the other 5 children were in the attic and that they would get out.
Why?
So the phones were not working anymore because that's where the fire was coming from.
Because it's 1945 and there's no phones. And it was fake the whole
time. So Marion ran to a neighbor's house to call the fire department. Then a motorist was driving by and saw the fire from the road, and so they drove to a tavern, like the closest like place they could get to, and they called the fire department as well. One of the two then had to head to the center of town to use a different phone to call the fire department. So I don't know exactly who ended up calling or like really why they had to go somewhere else to call. I think that like it said that one phone was like broken and one phone wasn't able to get through to the operator. I don't know like which was which, but someone ended up driving to the center of town and calling again.
They had cars? Okay, I'm gonna leave you alone.
I know they have cars.
Yeah, because of Henry Ford and stuff.
I just I feel like the 90s weren't that long ago, and people are like, they didn't even have cell phones. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, it must have been...
The era of home phones was a long one.
Yeah. Apparently. So while they were waiting for the fire, the family continued to try to get up to the attic to rescue the remaining 5 children. George and the older boys went to grab their ladder, their rose suchik ladder.
Yeah.
To try to get to the attic from the exterior of the home, but it wasn't in its usual spot and couldn't be found anywhere nearby. Instead, George, still barefoot from his sleep, tried to climb the outside wall of the house. It's snowing. He broke a window and cut his arm, but couldn't get inside the home. Then they tried to use a water barrel to extinguish the fire, but the contents of the barrel was frozen solid.
That makes
sense.
sense.
They're literally going through everything. George had 2 trucks that he used for work, and he tried to pull them both up to the house, hoping he'd be able to climb on top of them and reach the attic, but neither of them would start, which was odd because he had just used them like that day.
I mean, could just, I guess I don't know how cold it is. Like, it could just be because it's so cold, but intriguing.
Later people will say they wonder if he, like, because him and the boys were trying to start the car so quickly, if they may have flooded the engine.
Whatever
And
that
then
means.
I was, and then I was like, that must be a 1940s thing. It's like, I see people get in their car at the grocery store and drive off faster than I can open my car door. Like,
It's
I'm
me.
still like fumbling with my keys, and they have exited the store, gotten in their car, and gotten home. And I'm like, you can flood an engine?
Yeah. With what? Frozen water.
Oh, yeah. So basically, they felt like they had done everything they could to get to their remaining children, and they essentially had to watch their home burn down for the next 45 minutes. The fire department was low on firefighters because of the war.
Mm-hmm.
And only Fire Chief F.J. Morris was available that morning. But he wasn't that available because he couldn't drive the fire truck. So he had to call around to each individual firefighter for help. And he wasn't able to get a hold of anyone until later in the morning. So when the firemen did arrive, one of which was Jenny's brother.
Oh.
I was like, you couldn't even come?
Jenny's brother?
Jenny's the mom.
Oh, okay. So like an uncle?
Yeah.
To the children? Okay.
Yeah. All that was left was ashes.
Mm-hmm.
They went to work looking through the ashes. But by 10 a.m., they still had not been able to find any bones.
What is the point of a fire department at this point?
Yeah. Some people found this odd.
Mm-hmm.
Because there should have been some trace of the bodies of the 5 children who were unaccounted for.
Yeah.
Some other people, like modern firefighters, say that they just didn't search well enough.
Okay.
But Chief Morris said that he believed the fire had just been so hot that it burned the bones too.
Okay.
That's not it, babe.
No.
Even I know that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think they had phones in the 40s, and even I know that that's not the case. So when the fire department left, Chief Morris told George to leave the site of their home undisturbed. He said, "Don't touch this."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Wait for the state fire marshal's office so that they can conduct a more thorough investigation." There had been another account of the firefighters' findings, which stated that they had actually uncovered a few bone fragments and internal organs, and they
not hot enough.
Yeah,
for the internal organs.
So like, there's conflicting. There's gonna be conflicting newspaper reports. There's conflicting firefighters reports. So they're like, let the fire marshal come and do a better job, get more information. But 4 days after the fire, George and Jennie decided to bulldoze 5 feet of dirt on top of the site of their home. They had decided they could no longer bear to look at the place where their home once stood.
Don't look at it.
And they
Walk away.
wanted to build a memorial garden for their children.
Right on top.
Yeah.
They don't even want to clear the ashes.
Nope. So, death certificates were issued for the 5 children who did not make it out of the house.
They just be given death certificates to anybody, don't they?
Despite mixed reports on if bodies had been recovered, one newspaper put... There's something on my screen. Okay. One newspaper put in their report that all 5 bodies had been found. And then, in the exact same article, they said that only a part of one of the 5 bodies had been recovered. You gonna proofread?
Proofread? What?
They don't have proofreaders in 1940. A funeral was held for the children.
Newspapers are new. We hadn't realized the need for proofreaders. In fact, it was this case that made us hire our first proofreader.
Their funeral was held on January 2nd, but George and Jennie were too upset to attend. So the 4 other children went instead. The 3-year-old could go, but not their parents. Don't suspect George and Jennie. Don't suspect them.
I don't suspect them necessarily. I just think they're strange.
The local coroner convened an inquest into the cause of the fire, and that inquest found that it seemed to be an accidental fire caused by faulty wiring. And this inquest is actually where we get our first theory of what may have really happened to the Sodder home, and if it was an accident. This is kind of where we snowball, if you will. One of the jurors for the inquest was a man who had threatened George Sodder, telling him that his house would be burned down and his children would be destroyed due to his anti-Mussolini remarks.
Okay.
You see.
So he's a fascist. And he doesn't like that George is not a fascist.
Yeah. People really hated him for this.
It's not me literally reading a book about 1940s fascism right now and, living 2020s fascism.
So George Sodder had been born in Tula, Sardinia, Italy, as Giorgio Sodder.
Okay.
I didn't see a lot of Italian names that end in a U, to be honest. I think that's throwing me. Giorgio Sodder in 1895. He immigrated to the United States at 13 years old with his older brother. And once the 2 boys had cleared customs at Ellis Island, his brother returned to Italy. Giorgio began to go by George and began working on the railroads in Pennsylvania, running water and supplies to railway workers. Then he became a driver in Smithers, West Virginia, and began a trucking company of his own. Originally, his company hauled dirt to construction sites, and then eventually they began hauling coal. During his work in West Virginia, George met another Italian immigrant, the daughter of a storekeeper named Jennie Cipriani. Cipriani.
Perfect.
And the 2 were married in 1922.
Okay.
The Sodders moved to Fayetteville, which had a high Italian population.
Wow.
Which is where we get all the Mussolini lovers, apparently. They moved into a 2-story house just 2 miles north of town and began their large family. Their oldest son, George Jr., was born in 1923. And then their family continued to grow, and their final child, Sylvia, was born in 1942. By this time, their son, Joe, had left home to fight in World War II, and the Sodders had become a well-respected middle-class family in their community. George refused really to tell anyone why he had left Italy, but he was not at all shy about sharing his opinions about where the country stood now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd think, saying fascism bad.
Yeah.
Would, not get your house burned down, but, whatever.
It's, a lot of the time, it's the fascists who are violent.
It's crazy.
I don't know.
Not Antifa?
He was, to put it lightly, not a fan of Italian dictator Mussolini. He had been vocal about this, especially once his son went to fight in World War II. Sure. Up until the execution of Mussolini in 1943, and well after he had died.
He said, I don't care that he's dead. He still sucks.
He sucks ass. In October of 1945, a traveling life insurance salesman visited George Sodder. George had turned down purchasing insurance from him, and the man warned him that his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed. This is the inquest guy. So here's my first thought when I heard that. They have life insurance salesmen in 1940? No, that wasn't my first thought. I'm just kidding. So at first I thought of the insurance mafia episode of The Office, which I know you aren't an office person, but basically this man comes into the office and he is a traveling insurance salesman, and he's like he's clearly Italian. He's like so over the top, grossly Italian. I hate it. But anyway, so he's like telling him all these things that could happen, that it would be good to have life insurance. What if you get in a car accident? What if your house burns down, you know? And they're like, that guy's in the mafia and he's threatening you. And Michael's like, oh my God, that guy's in the mafia and he's threatening me. And so I was like, okay, like, it's not that ominous a warning from someone who is trying to convince you that you need insurance in the event of your death.
Yeah.
What makes it ominous is that the insurance salesman tells George that this was going to happen because of the, quote, dirty remarks he had been making about Mussolini.
Yeah. Not just like gonna happen because accidents happen.
Right. Not gonna happen because your house is like faulty or whatever. Like, no, it's payback for you being an anti-fascist.
You higher risk because
Yeah,
you hate Mussolini, so you need more insurance.
But I will say, in defense of the fascist insurance salesman,
we love Mussolini.
He was not the only one that warned George of impending doom. A worker had come by the house and taken a look around and told George that a pair of fuse boxes in the back of the house would cause a fire one day.
Okay.
Fair.
See, these are the worst kind of cases to me, is when the case is solved multiple times.
But
you're like,
George,
unsolved. And I'm like, nope, a man threatened to burn his house down. Solved. Nope, a man warned him it was going to burn down. Solved.
George is like, that's weird because they don't even have fuse boxes. No, okay. I have to stop that.
This is such a feral finale episode for the year.
No, but George did brush it off because he had just had the entire house rewired when their electric stove was put in, and the electric company said that everything was safe and up to code. So he was like,
these people are just trying to take my money. Like,
yeah,
I'm not
he's like, how
for
the
your
fuck
trick.
is my house gonna burn down when I literally just got it rewired?
You silly.
Y'all are dumb. So, despite what may have been potential warnings of a house fire, the family just like really had trouble accepting that 5 of the children had literally completely perished in an accidental fire. At first they were like, I don't think it was an accident. So, in the weeks leading up to the fire, George Jr. had noticed a strange car parked along the main highway that went through their town, and he and his brothers came to believe that the driver had been watching them come home from school each day. On top of that, the circumstances surrounding the fire itself were odd. The Sodders felt that if this was an electrical fire that had engulfed the entire home, the power would have cut off.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not a fire or an electrician. But through the beginning of the fire, their Christmas lights stayed lit. And do you know what?
No.
What?
Don't do it.
But like, I was like, I don't know. I don't know how long they stayed lit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I would think like a faulty wire situation like could do the power, but like, would it do it everywhere? Like,
my guess is like if the wires are like sparking, that it would lead to a power outage. That's what I would think. Like
unless like
when that transformer exploded outside of our school, the power was out in the whole school for 2 days, like, I think that does make sense. The ladder that George had tried to use to climb into the attic from outside was later found 75 feet away from his usual spot at the bottom of an embankment.
So, like, outside and, like, kind of hidden from the house?
Like, hidden or, like, maybe, like, tossed?
Okay.
When the home was inspected after the fire, the phone repairman... Why are you bringing in a phone repairman to your completely burned out?
Your ashes.
I'm sorry. Like, what? The phone repairman found that the phone line had not been burned, but had been cut by someone at the pole, at the telephone pole. So the repairman explained that whoever did this would have had to climb 14 feet up the, he's not saying, like, if they cut, like, he's like, they cut this. They climbed 14 feet up the telephone pole and then reached 2 feet off of the pole to cut the phone cord.
Freaky. They love Mussolini.
they like ride hard for Mussolini.
Like, that's crazy.
Like, this is nuts. Like, I can't believe people love him like this much.
Wow, he's like their Taylor Swift.
I mean, look. Italians love an Italian.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you what.
Fascism or not. Whatever.
So neighbors alerted police to a man who had been stealing a block and tackle near the Sodder home around the time of the fire. And police were able to pretty quickly identify him and arrest him. And he admitted to the theft. And he also admitted to cutting the phone line. And he admitted that he cut the phone line because he thought it was the power line.
Oh. So would that phone line have been, like, to other houses?
I'm
like a neighborhood?
I'm guessing not, just because, or maybe it was, and then that's why when they ran to the neighbor's house, they had to go into town later. Maybe. So
why did he want to cut the power line?
Great question. Mm-hmm. There's no record of who this man was, why he was stealing the block and tackle from the Sodders, or why he would have wanted to cut the power line. I looked at it. It's like a pulley, like a weight pulley system of some sort.
Okay.
Jennie speculated, though, that cutting, I don't know how she reasons this, but she says that if they had cut the power lines, they would not have been able to escape the home at all. Why does she think that? I don't know.
You have an automatic locking door. In 1945? Security system that won't let you out. What are you talking about?
You even have power. This is crazy to me. So she thinks, like, that could have been
because, like, they couldn't walk through the dark?
She's saying, like, this guy...
We wouldn't have found our way to the door. It would have been dark.
In the blaze. She said, like, this guy started the fire and then tried to cut our power line so that we were stuck in it, I guess.
Okay.
But the man denied having anything to do with the fire, and that seemed to be the end of the suspicion surrounding him.
Because we don't even know his name.
Mm-hmm. Another thing the family found odd was the fact that neither of George's work trucks would start up. Some people thought that maybe they had flooded the engines, but George thought they had been tampered with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why he thinks that. He just does.
Because it seems like everything else was tampered with.
Police were also able to track down the woman who had called shortly before the fire, or a woman who had called shortly before the fire. Oh, no. The woman who had called the house.
Oh, yeah.
The fire. And she told them she really did just have the wrong number.
She said, I'm really actually just dumb.
I was drunk as hell.
Drunk!
I wasn't even at my own house. A bus driver that had passed the house the night of the fire claimed to have seen people throwing what looked like balls of fire at the house. Okay.
Salt. Again.
A few months later, Sylvia found a small, hard, dark green, rubber ball-like object near their home. George looked it over and said it looked like a pineapple bomb, which is a type of hand grenade. And Jennie wondered if this is what she had heard hitting the roof just before the fire began, leading the family to believe that the fire had started there and had been intentional. That the fire had started on the roof. Yeah.
Yeah.
So probably the most convincing piece of evidence that the children may not have died in the fire is the fact that their bones weren't found. Jennie, my queen, found it odd that the children's bodies would have burned so completely, yet their kitchen appliances were still standing and pieces of their roof were found still recognizable.
I agree.
She also pointed out that there had been another house fire in the area around the same time, and the newspaper report about that fire noted that skeletal remains were found for all 7 family members in that house. She was like, how is our house fire so much hotter that it's burning everything?
Except not everything.
Right. Jennie even conducted her own experiments burning animal bones to see if any of them would burn completely, and none of them ever did.
And she became Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah. I was like, okay. She's that bitch. Like, she said, I'm gonna do it myself. Like, where did she get the animal bones? I don't know.
I don't know.
She contacted a local crematorium to get their opinion, and they told her that even when they cremate bodies at 2,000 degrees for 2 hours, there are bones left. So if
you the whole point of cremation was that there's not bones left.
I was gonna say, so if you've ever 1945, maybe their crematoriums were different. I don't know, but like
maybe they're 4,000 degrees now.
that was my first thought was like, oh, so if you've ever like had someone cremated, just know you got everything back but their bones. Apparently. But I do think like that happened on the newest season of Only Murders in the Building. But anyway, regardless, that's what they told her. And she was like, that's crazy, because the fire that burned her house down had only burned for 45 minutes and definitely had not reached 2,000 degrees.
Yeah, I feel sure about that too.
Yeah. So this began the theories that the Sodder children had made it out alive before the fire had even started. One woman said she had been watching the fire progress from the road and had seen a car pass by with the missing children looking out the window. The next morning, another witness claimed she had served the children breakfast at a rest stop between Fayetteville and Charleston, along with a car with a Florida license plate.
Charleston, South Carolina?
No, Charleston, West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
So people are starting to like say that they saw them get out of the house, they saw them somewhere the next day, and so the parents are starting to wonder if they were like taken and then the house was set on fire.
Sure.
So maybe they wouldn't look for them or something. The Sodders eventually hired a private investigator named C.C. Tinsley from the nearby town of Golly Bridge. This is how the family learned that the insurance salesman had been on the coroner's inquest jury. And had been part of finding the fire to be an accident.
Suspicious.
The PI also got word, you're gonna lose your mind, that Chief Morris had found a human heart amongst the ash of the fire, which he took and locked away into a metal box and then buried without telling anyone except his minister.
That's a pretty Catholic thing to do, too.
Okay.
To do something wackadoodle and only tell your priest.
When Tinsley and George asked the minister about this, he said, yeah, that's true. That's what he told me. So they confronted Maurice, and he was like, yeah, that's true. I'll show you where I buried the box. So they dug it up and took the contents to a funeral director to confirm if it was a human heart, possibly the heart of one of their children. But he told them that it was, what do you think it is?
A ball-like object.
It was a fresh beef liver that had not once been exposed to a fire. Because in what world would this fire chief who is saying it burned through their bones not burn through a soft organ?
Yeah, is he like doing some sort of witchcraft? Like what? Why is he burying a beef liver?
I'll tell you. So he said, okay, you got me.
I just actually didn't think you would go check and see what this was.
So he admitted that he had buried the box after the fire in the hopes that the Sodders would find it and believe it was an organ of one of the missing children and accept that they had died in the fire. How did their heart get in a metal box then?
They just happened to be digging in the ground, and they would say, oh, one of our children put their own organ into this box and put it in the ground for us to find a gift. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nah, he was doing witchcraft.
Yeah. George also reached out to
Mussolini already dead by this point?
Yes.
He was summoning Mussolini back from the dead.
George also reached out to the FBI, asking them to investigate what he believed was the kidnapping of his children. But FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover replied, quote, although I would like to be of service, the matter related appears to be of local character and does not come within the investigative jurisdiction of this bureau. If the local authorities request the bureau's assistance, I will of course direct agents to assist, end quote.
He was too busy.
Basically, he said
fighting
no.
communism.
The Fayetteville police and fire departments, which consider the case closed and the children to be deceased, of course, did not make any such requests. They were like, no, those kids died.
Yeah.
Dumbass.
We already know what happened.
In 1949, George reached out to a Washington, D.C. pathologist named Oscar Hunter to assist with another search at the site of the home. In this search, they
at the site of the home that you buried.
Yeah. Well, and you're going to see why that was a mistake. In this search, they uncovered a dictionary that had belonged to the children, some coins, and several small bone fragments that were determined to be human vertebrae. They sent the bones to Marshall T. Newman, a specialist at the Smithsonian Institution. Newman confirmed that the fragments found were lumbar vertebrae, all from the same person. And based on the fusion of the transverse recesses, Newman believed that the deceased would have been between the ages of 16 and 23. The oldest of the missing Sodder children was 14 at the time of the fire. I don't like how slow they drive by. And so this caused people to think like, well, it's not one of them because the youngest one was 14. However, Newman did include in the report that some boys younger than 16 could have vertebrae that appear more advanced. Like, that happens. But he did not think that these bones belonged to the Sodder children, as the bones had no signs of having been exposed to fire. He also noted that it was strange that these would have been the only bones found because they were partial remains from one person. If they had been from the fire, they would have about the same damage to all the kids. They should have been whole at the very least. and they likely would have found all of the children's remains.
Or at least all of one person's.
Right. Yeah. So he's like, either it would be a whole person or it should be 5 whole people, and it's neither of those things. So he concluded that the vertebrae had likely come from the dirt George had poured over the site. He supposedly traced it back to a nearby cemetery, but they said like they don't know how George would have gotten a hold of the dirt from the cemetery and like what that would have meant. But basically he said like it's not these kids, and it's probably from him pouring dirt on top of it.
Dang.
But you were specifically told not to.
That's just somebody's spine. We just don't know whose it is.
Like at first I was like, we're not gonna find out whose that was, but I guess if it's a cemetery, they're like, no, we don't. So the investigation though into the found bones attracted more attention to the case. And the West Virginia legislature held 2 hearings on the case in 1950, but Governor Okie L. Pattison and the state police superintendent W.E. Burchett told the Sodders that their case was hopeless and closed it at the state level. The FBI did eventually decide that there was a potential to investigate the case as a possible interstate kidnapping, but they dropped the case after 2 years when their leads weren't turning up anything promising. Eventually, the family put up a billboard and flyers that read, quote, it had a picture of the 5 kids, and it said, what was their fate? Kidnapped, murdered, or are they still alive? And they offered a $5,000 reward for information that could settle the case of any one of the children. Like, if you could tell me where one of these kids is, I will give you $5,000. They later doubled the reward amount, and the billboard they had put up at the site of the house became a traffic landmark. So, last thing we're going to talk about really is, like, I guess, like, what people think happened, but also, like, some sightings of the Sodder children. So, 1 week after the fire, a woman named Ida Crutchfield, who ran a hotel in Charleston, West Virginia, claimed to have seen all of the children. Remember, the day after they were spotted between Fayetteville and Charleston. She was not able to remember the exact date, but she said that the children had come in around midnight with 2 men and 2 women, all of whom appeared to be Italian. She tried to speak with the children, but when she did, one of the men became hostile and started speaking to the rest of the guests in Italian, and then none of them would speak to her anymore. She also said that they left early the next morning. I will say, just in case there's somebody who's like really into this case and wants to comment and say like, actually, they don't really consider her a credible witness, because they said that it took her 2 years to come forward, and that it was only after she saw pictures of them that she said something. But
which sometimes could be like, oh, that's what those kids look like.
I know those
kids.
That's a weird Italian people that were yelling at me. At one point, this is like, I think, sad when we get into like all of the links George went to try to find his kids. At one point, George saw a magazine photo of a ballet troupe from New York City, and one of the dancers stood out to him. He thought she might be Betty, and he drove to her school and demanded to see her in person. But the school obviously was in 1950s. The school was like, no, you can't do that. Which I'm kind of surprised by for the time.
Yeah.
So George would go on to follow all of the sightings that came in. He traveled to St. Louis, Missouri after hearing that Martha may have been being held in a convent there. He went to Florida to find a relative of Jennie's whose children looked similar to his, and he required proof that they were their children before he would leave. He went to Texas because a bar patron claimed to have heard 2 people talking about their involvement in a fire on Christmas Eve in West Virginia, and then a woman in the Houston area wrote to the family claiming that she had met Louis Sodder in a bar, and after having a little too much to drink, he admitted who he was to her. She told George that she believed he and Maurice were both living in Texas somewhere, but George and his son-in-law, Grover, who married Sylvia, were unable to speak with her. So they couldn't find her, but they did find the men she had talked to that said that they were Lewis and Maurice, and they said they told them that they weren't.
Okay. Did they say, like, we did say that, but we lied, or
they just
we
said,
never said that?
They just said we are not your sons.
Okay.
But Grover said that George, like, didn't believe them for, like, the rest of his life. He thought they were lying for some reason.
Like, but he, like, saw them, and he was like, these are my sons?
Yeah, he spoke to them, and they said, like, we're not your kids.
But he has to, like, believe it for some reason.
It does, like, there's a picture of one of these guys, and I remember the first time I saw that picture, I was like, oh, like, that does look like his kids, but he is so much older now.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can find it and send it to you, like the side by side. Yeah, I can. Here, I'll send it to you, and we'll get your opinion live on air.
Mm-hmm.
It's also hard to tell because it's like a 1940s black and white grainy photograph.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But, like, there's, like, such an age difference that, like, if I was friends with that guy, that older guy, and he was like, this is my baby picture, I'd be like, okay, yeah.
Sure.
But, like, it's also, like, it's not, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not, like, obvious.
Sure.
So, so George, like, basically, Grover said he just doubted it the rest of his life. Like, he thought, like, that was them. Another letter they received the same year, also they thought was a confirmation that Lewis was still alive. So Jennie found a letter in the mail that was addressed to her, and it was from Central City, Kentucky, but had no return address. This is where we get this picture. All right, so maybe this isn't the same guy, I guess.
But it's one of the sons.
It's supposedly one of the sons.
Sure.
So it's a picture of a man around the age of 30 with, like, maybe could have been Lewis, who would have been in his 30s by then. And on the back, it said, Lewis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, I little boys, A9032 or 35.
I don't know what that means.
No. So they hired another private investigator to go to Central City and look for this, but he never got back to them, and they could not ever find him again.
Does he little boys?
I little boys.
But maybe so does the PI.
I think he took their money.
Yeah.
They added the picture of this 30-year-old man to the billboard and this is sad, and they put a framed version of it over their fireplace. I know. George admitted to the Charleston Gazette Mail late the next year that the lack of information, he said, it was, quote, like hitting a rock wall. We can't go any further. Time is running out for us, but we only want to know. If they did die in the fire, we want to be convinced. Otherwise, we want to know what happened to them, end quote. It's, like, fair, you know?
Yeah, it's just like there's no way they can convince them now.
Right. And that's the thing is, like, so like I said, that picture, it wasn't the guys from Texas, but I'm assuming that at that point in looking for them, it's all going to kind of be the same. They're all going to be so much older that anyone with their features, you'd be like, oh, that could be them.
Yeah.
But you don't know. So the Sodders did turn the soil they bulldozed over the site into a memorial garden, and Jennie tended to it for the rest of her life, always hoping that all of her children would be able to see it. George Sodder died in 1969, and Jennie and her surviving children, except John, who never talked about the night of the fire except to say that the family should just accept what happens and move on with their lives.
Oh.
Everyone else continued to seek answers to their questions about the missing children. After George's death, Jennie stayed in the family home. She put up fencing, she added additional rooms, but for the rest of her life, she wore black in mourning.
Sad.
And then she died in 1989. And that is when they took down the billboard.
And she was reincarnated as Taylor Swift.
I know. The year of our Lord and Savior. And then that's when they took down the billboard, and like it was looking rough. So, but the fight was not over. The surviving Sodder children continue to talk about the case. They and their neighbors began to theorize that the Sicilian mafia was trying to extort money from George, and that the children might have been taken by someone who knew about the planned arson and told them, you will be safe if you leave, and like convinced them to leave the house. And then they think that they were taken back to Italy. And then people are like, well, then why would they not come back to you? And they thought maybe it was to keep the rest of the family safe from harm.
Sure. That's fair.
So the youngest Sodder child died in 2021, Sylvia. Okay. And she had said before that the fire was her earliest memory. She was 3. She said, I was the last of the kids to leave the home. I experienced my parents' grief for a long time. And then her daughter said she promised my grandparents she wouldn't let the story die, that she would do everything she could. So even today, in 2024, people are trying to solve this case. I mean, look, here I am. There are forums on web sleuths. It's been covered on other podcasts. And a lot of people believe that the children did die in the fire. A local author wrote about the case in 2012, and his name is George Bragg, and he wrote a book in 2012 called West Virginia's Unsolved Murders. And he said that so there was like conflicting stories from John, the one who said we should all just move on.
The one who loves Mussolini.
So at first he said that he went into the attic and physically tried to wake up his siblings, and they wouldn't get up. And then he changed his story and said that he couldn't get into the attic because the stairs were on fire.
Okay.
So this author thinks that the first version of events is true. That John saw his siblings in the attic that night, tried to wake them up. They didn't wake up. That's why he's saying everyone should move on and accept it. He says, quote, logic tells you that they probably did burn up in the fire, but you can't always go by logic. End quote.
So he thinks what? That like he tried to wake them, they literally were just too asleep, but now he like feels guilty, so he wants everyone to move on? Or like
no, I think he's just like he's saying like John is like trying to tell y'all like they died.
Yeah.
Like I saw them in the house burned to the ground, they died in the house. And like he's like logically that would make the most sense. Like that's the easiest explanation.
Sure.
But like he's like, is it possible that that's not true? Yes, but I think that's what happened. But like I just think I think it's crazy that the 3 other children, minus Sylvia, she was 3, but like the 2 other children and the parents wouldn't be able to say like, no, he didn't go in there.
Yeah.
Or like, yeah, you're right, he did.
Yeah. I also am just like, if you literally couldn't get one of them to wake up, like, were they already dead? Like, I need an explanation for why they're unwakeable when there's a raging fire. Like, yes. So did John, like, kill them?
Yeah. So National Public Radio did a segment on the case around its 60th anniversary in 2005. And the host, Stacey Horn, said that she like also thinks that they died in the fire, and that she kind of like the bones not being found, she thinks that they that like they only searched for 2 hours and that wouldn't have been time to find all of their bones, and like 2, even if they had, they might not have realized they were bones. But she said, quote, however, there is enough genuine weirdness about this whole thing that if someday it is learned that the children did not die in the fire, I won't be shocked. End quote.
Yeah.
So I think that's fair. Like, too. I just, I don't know. I just think that like, if a house in the same town had a fire solved by the same fire department and they found all 7 sets of bones, like, how did they suddenly get to this house and they're like, I don't know,
and
what
they don't know what
is.
bones look like. Yeah,
I just a little baby. I don't know bones. Like, come on now, they know what bones fucking look like. They know what they're looking for, and they've done it before. Like, I just think I don't think that we should give them credit for potentially being idiots.
Yeah,
like,
it's just like assume
they don't know what a bone looks
that they
like.
know how to do their job. Right. And start there.
That's my opinion. But that's it.
Wow, what do you think though?
I don't think that they died in the fire. And I don't know like I have never heard anyone bring up like a theory that the kids like ran away. And so I don't want to like lean that way and be like they're like fleeing for some reason or whatever. But I do think that I don't think they were in the house anymore when the fire happened. And I don't know if they were like kidnapped and killed somewhere and then the fire happened to like throw them off, or if they were like kidnapped and taken, if they were rescued for whatever reason. Sure. Like, I don't know. But I don't think they were in the house.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
You like? Yeah. Okay. Woo. Also, they're so cute and they have the biggest eyebrows ever. And I love them.
Cute
little Italian babies.
All right, guys. This time we actually won't see you till season 3 in 2025.
But in the meantime, hopefully we'll have some Christmas merch up that you can shop to show your support while you're waiting to share new episodes with your friends.
Yeah, maybe a couple bonus episodes if we run into some free time.
Yeah.
Hey, we love you. Bye.
Bye.